Hey there, Film Buds. Welcome back to the Film Buds podcast. I'm your host, Paul.
And I'm Lauren.
And we are joined today in our third Women in Film episode by longtime friend of the show, Madelaine Davis, my
Yes.
sister. Hello, Madelaine.
Hello.
How are you? I see you're wearing green for St. Patrick's Day.
I mean, we're pretty fucking Irish, so.
No,
You know.
you make valid points. I did not.
Well, obviously that means Lauren just gets to pinch the shit out of you now.
I mean, those are the rules.
Uh-huh.
I am wearing green, but that's also because I had to go to work today, and I was like, if anybody pinches me at work, I'm gonna lay hands on them. So,
So as I mentioned, this is our third Women in Film episode. All month long, we've been doing sort of a Women's History Month thing dedicated to film. And our first episode was Women in Film from last year, 2021. We did The Power of the Dog and Titan. And then in our second episode, we did Women in Anime.
yes.
Where we were joined by Austin and Tori from the Third Impact Anime podcast. And today, Mad's coming in to talk with us about women in film from the first half of the 20th century, so everything before 1950. And I thought that this would be an interesting sort of dive. It was actually kind of hard to find movies that fit this bill.
Yeah.
Shocking.
No.
And actually, I went and I was looking through some movies, and I found some that were directed by women, but there were a lot of ones where it was like a one-off, and then she didn't direct anything else. Or you could find women that like had jobs like in writing or editing or some sort of other thing. It was very hard to find a consistent director. And actually, interestingly enough, in that search, I found that one of the first films directed by a woman is also potentially the first like narrative feature film ever made, but it's also now a lost film.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Classic.
So it was an interesting little dive. But eventually I found two films, one from 1916, one from 1940, and I knew that I wanted to have, for as many episodes as I could have, guests on, particularly women or women-identifying guests, onto the show to discuss women's role in film. And Madelaine, on top of that, also was nice enough to write our initial sort of statement on women in film. And you can go and read that. I've got it posted. It's called The Women on Screen, The Woman in the Mirror. And before we get too much deeper into it, I did just want to ask, I guess I also haven't asked you, sometimes I think people don't always get the whole concept of representation on screen or even behind the camera. And so if it's too loaded of a question or you're not sure if you have an answer immediately, that's totally fine. But I did just sort of want to ask, what does it mean to have a film, I guess I won't talk about in front of the camera, but what does it mean to have a film directed by a woman for y'all?
No, yeah, I'm serving that back to you.
Damn.
And I apologize if this is like too loaded of a question or anything like that.
Yeah, how dare you?
Gosh, put us on the spot. I don't know. I guess like my answer isn't necessarily behind the camera. I think that it is very interesting to have like a woman's perspective, but also like that doesn't necessarily mean that like she's written the piece that she's directing. I am totally here for like equal opportunity for all people. But like it's definitely a seat that like could be hit or miss depending on what the piece is that we're talking about You know, just because she directed it doesn't mean that she necessarily like identifies with the message behind it. But as an actor, I've always been more drawn to characters, obviously, that look like myself, that feel like who I am as a person. Because, you know, not only being a woman, I am a woman of color, and that is, you know, an even shorter list of positive representation out there. Um, and so it was always like a hard thing to like, especially growing up, you know, trying to find like shows that had characters that like I could find a bit of myself in. It was always like the either like the darker drawn character because of like their features, or because of the fact that like there was the one character of color that I was like, well, this has to therefore be me. It didn't matter what their racial identity was at that point. Long as it, at the end of the day, long as they weren't white, I was going to be more drawn to them as a woman of color. And like obviously things are broadening more than they had been, but like characters that I always like really enjoyed watching was like, you know, Buttercup from the Powerpuff Girls, because, you know, she had dark hair and I have dark hair, and even though she is white, that was something that I could be like, if I got to be this character, if I got to dress up as this character, people would be more forgiving of the fact that she wasn't black because of X, Y, or Z, you know. But I mean, there were even less female black directors out there. So like the list of having somebody in the director's seat, I think is less known when it comes to the female perspective, at least in pop culture in a broad sense. And so like I would love for there to be more representation just in general out there, more variety, not only for myself but also for others who aren't going, you know, who aren't the norm, let's say, of the industry. Because it is hard, and I understand, you know, people being like, oh, I don't get it if you are in the majority of representation, like I don't understand why this is important. But it can be very self-deprecating to not see yourself represented in a positive light on film or behind the camera, or really in any industry, because then you don't think that you can ever achieve that goal, whatever it is, because nobody else has, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely.
um so yeah, I think that it is very important to have more, not only just like women, but just like more options just in general out there for not only like myself, but for future generations, for current generations, you know, so that way it's an extension of self-worth. You know, if I can see somebody out there who is achieving the things that I want to achieve in my life, who looks like me or sounds like me, or, you know, is in any way, shape, form different, then there is also a chance for myself to fit into this weird puzzle that is life.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to touch on something, but first I want to see or hear Mad's reaction. So, Mad, how do you feel?
Um, I mean, obviously, like in the piece, I kind of talked a little bit about my own feelings about like the idea of representation. And you know, I think it's really funny that we were talking about this right on the coattails of the whole kind of fiasco with that film critic talking about Seeing Red, which I haven't gotten a chance to see yet. But you know, obviously, his whole disconnect was like, well, I'm not like you know, this particular person. I'm not. I believe it. She's Korean, correct?
Chinese
Chinese. Okay. Um.
in Toronto.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I know she's in Toronto. And it's like this very particular kind of like Chinese Toronto upbringing that she like tapped into in the film, and you know, there's uh this film critic then who saw it and who was like, I didn't get it. I didn't understand it. And I think the thing that's interesting about that is I think there's so many like women or any kind of minority group, it's so hard sometimes to see yourself reflected in stories. And like for us, we constantly then have to adapt and learn how to connect with stories, even if those stories aren't made for us. And I thought it was just like such a clear example of the fact that like you're a white man, you very rarely have to actually do that. You very rarely have to go out the scope of your own experience and connect with other people's stories. Which is a thing I think for the rest of us, like we have to do all of the time. And so I think, you know, when you talk about this idea of representation, I think it's positive, not only for the people then who are being represented, but I think it's also, I think it creates a sense of you have to go outside of yourself, which again, I think is a skill set for us to have. And on top of which, you know, I think for me as like a writer, a creator, I love seeing people in front of the camera who are representing something that I can aspire to, someone I can recognize within myself or my own life experiences. But I do also think it's so important to have those people creating those narratives, because, and this is just again my experience, but the way I think men write stories about women is very different than women write stories about women. And I feel a lot of times like much more, I guess, sort of connected, or like when I see a story, you know, read a story, see a film written by women, made by women, I'm like, this is like someone who understands, this someone who like gets the thing, this like experience of like living and existing in this like sort of female identity. I just don't think men ever have to really tackle or think about or deal with. So I think it's incredibly important for people to go out there and create their own stories and have women behind the camera writing the script in front of the camera. You know, really being the ones who are in charge of like writing and sort of like narrating their own stories. Because I think for a really long time too, you know, like, yeah, women have been in front of the camera. They've been in films pretty much as long as films have been in existence. Again, from a very male perspective. And you see all the time that like women definitely spend like a ton of time in movies, but I can't think of the statistics like exactly off the top of my head, but like when you talk about like actual screen time or speaking roles or like the types of characters that they're often given, like let's be honest, a lot of times it's not as interesting or as much screen time or as, you know, as the male characters, the male protagonists get. A lot of times female characters aren't allowed to be as like messy or complicated or interesting as their male counterparts. And I think it's because a lot of times that's coming from like a very male perspective. And so I think it's incredibly important for people to be able to see themselves, to look on the screen and see stories and actors who look like them, who are telling stories that reflect their own life and their own experiences. So you don't feel so like alone or so weird or like, you know, I think whether people would do it intentionally or not, it creates this idea of like what's normative, and what's like the default and what isn't. And like it's very clear that you are not the default. You're not the norm. And like that messes with, I think that messes with your head. Like you grow up here, like again, not necessarily having the movie look you in the eye and say, you know, but you're like, you're tangentially aware of it. And I think that frames how you think of yourself in your own life. And so I think, you know, I always growing up connected with characters who I felt, you know, I represented my own experience. You know, I think about like characters like Joe in Little Women was like one of my all-time favorite things, or yeah, like Arbuckle, or you know, there's like a million different things that I watched or loved growing up. that I identified so strongly with. And like, I have tons of female characters that I just felt so connected to. And I think that's super important because that helped frame how I thought about myself and my own sort of like my own possibilities in my own life. Um, but yeah, I think it's important because it sort of shows you do exist and you're not alone and you're not invisible and there are paths for you, even if it's not always shown on screen. Like seeing those people, seeing those stories made it feel like I can still try. Like even if it isn't common or normal, I can still go out there and do that. Other people have gone out there and done it before. And so I think it kind of like emboldens you. And so I just think it's so important in like a very real way. Just know that like there are those people. You're not weird. There are other people out there that are like you, that look like you, that have the same experiences as you, and that you live complicated and complex a life is any white male protagonist.
Yes.
No, that's all really well said. Good art. Before I ask my follow up of Lauren, good art, whether it be a painting, a poem, a movie, a song, and actually maybe not even just good art, great art, impactful art, is ultimately an exercise in empathy.
Yeah.
And so, we talk about this all the time when we talk about the similarity of international film and the similarity of international struggle as represented in film. That doesn't just go across nationalities and race and ethnicity and things like that. It also transcends, sex and gender and things like that. Universality of struggle,
Yeah.
is the human condition. And so impactful art is an exercise in empathy at its core.
Definitely. For sure.
My follow-up for you, because you mentioned acting and directing and that sort of thing. I guess I've never actually asked if you've been directed by a woman versus directed by a man, and if there were any kind of, for you personally, differences in that experience.
That's a good question. I'm very curious.
Honestly, I guess it really just depends on the person, not necessarily I guess in a gendered bias, because I've had very like, like, oh, just smile a little bit, kick your leg higher, do a fun laugh or something, like very general directing from like both sides.
No, of course.
But it also just really depends, I think, on the person, because I had a director in college, J.J. Abrams, who was not J.J. Abrams. That's a director. J.J. Rosella, that's his name. Sorry, my brain just like completely blanked out and like auto-filled a name for a second.
I was about to be really excited though. It's like,
in the presence of a star.
That's the biggest comedy of the day. Who was like really interested in like he studied in the Meisner technique, and so he was like really like, what are the words, how do you feel, what are you experiencing as a person, how can we bring as much of you into this part as we can. And I've also had I had a director when I just got out of high school who does a lot of shows up in Davidson. And she was very like by the books director. She was like, all right, you need to be here. It was like very like, like a machine almost. Like it really just, I think, depends on the person. But I think that actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I feel like she, as a female director, had to like prove herself a little bit more and be a little bit harder as a director because she is a woman than like he got to be as a man. He got to be more like, softer and more introspective when it came to directing, because like he didn't have to get over the struggle of being taken seriously in the industry.
He didn't have to immediately command authority,
Exactly.
whereas she needed to come in and
prove
hit the screws.
Yeah.
No, yeah. But you know, I did a directing project in college because I had a directing class. Um, and I love directing. I think that directing is such a like a fun experiment. You know, it's putting all of these pieces together to bring something that is otherwise just words on a piece of paper to life and make it have purpose and have meaning. You know, and not just be flat and everyday. Why are these characters saying these things? For what purpose? How does this line lead to the next line and lead to the end of the play? You know, what is the through line of it, especially for things that aren't necessarily just easy, I guess is the best way to say it. You know, not just a normal like, oh, you know, this obviously leads into that. You know, more nuanced work. And like I would love to go into that more extensively, but the thing, you know, with the way that the industry is, it is harder to get into that, you know, not only as a woman, but also just as like a young woman of color. You know, that's just like you forget about it. Yeah, you don't have any experience. How do you know what you know? You know, it doesn't matter that I have like almost 20 years of acting experience. Like throw all of that out the way. You know, you don't have any written down here on the paper experience, so therefore I'm going to go with college Joe who has a degree in it, who's probably a white dude. But yeah, no, I think that my directing experience, I've also been directed by less women than I have been men, just in a general sense. I had one director in college actually who Kirsten Trump, who was this very like just on her own planet kind of a woman, very like a Professor Trelawney kind of person. Just like, you know, if you didn't catch her on the right moment, you were like, Kirsten, where are you? Come back to me. You know, she would drift off and then she would come back, and she created like beautiful art, but it was also just like a very different process of doing things. That like I think if she hadn't been in the right place, like people would have just like disregarded her as just a woman, you know.
Just a fruity flake. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I've rambled for a while about your question. I think it really just depends.
No, because also, you know, regardless of gender or how you identify, you know, people are still people.
Exactly.
I guess I was, you know, just sort of curious if you had noticed any kind of particular difference or anything like that. But you're right, at the end of the day, people are people. A woman can make a hostile set, a man can make a hostile set, a non-identifying person can make a hostile set. People are people.
Yeah. Well, and
No,
I was
yeah.
like to the two films that we're watching today, I think like a woman can take a stance where I'm very like,
Yeah. No, absolutely. So going off of that, we are doing two films, like I said. Our first one is from 1916, and it is called Where Are My Children?
Where are they?
You'll see. And our second film that we're going to be talking about is a film called Dance Girl Dance. Little bit of a content warning because our first film, Where Are My Children, covers two very controversial topics. One that's a controversy still, one that is a very outdated mode of thinking, of a pseudoscience, and they are abortion and eugenics. And there's really just no way of beating around that bush. So it's best to just put that out there that our first movie that we're going to talk about, Where Are My Children, is heavily about that. And if you really aren't interested, I always post time codes. You can jump ahead to the second movie. it's about Lucille Ball and Catherine O'Hara. And it doesn't have any of this. So just a fair warning. Normally we have clips. We have no clips this go round. And so if it's good with y'all, I'm just going to go ahead and jump right on into it.
Sure.
Yeah, do it.
Cool. So Where Are My Children, as I mentioned, came out in 1916. It is directed by Lois Weber and Phillips Smalley. They were husband and wife at the time.
Oh, okay.
And it is written by Lois Weber, Franklin Hall, and Lucy Payton. It stars Tyrone Power Sr., Mary Wellcamp, Cora Drew, Rena Rogers, and a woman, I believe her name, I need to pull it up real quickly, is Helen Rapinoe? It's actually a little bit hard to find her name, and I'll explain why in just one second. Her name is Helen Raume. But the issue is that in the actual official cast, she is listed as Mrs. Tyrone Powers, and it is because she is Tyrone Powers' wife, and so she actually doesn't have her name listed on IMDb. You have to go and hunt for her name.
Classic.
And the premise is a district attorney's outspoken stand on abortion gets him in trouble with the local community. Which is, in my opinion, not at all really an accurate plot synopsis.
No.
No, not even a little bit.
So for a little background before we dig too deep into it, Lois Weber was born in 1879 in Allegheny City, Pennsylvania. She worked in the pre-Hays Code. So the Hays Code was from 1934 to 1968, and it was this sort of self-censorship that happened inside of the film industry that was very particular about how films were made, the content that was in them, and it prohibited profanity, nudity, graphic violence, rape, graphic sex, subversive or controversial themes.
Okay.
And so she worked in an entire period before that. She directed 135 films.
Wow.
And she essentially ran all the way up to the start of the Hays Code. Her last film was in 1934. She even did some like step-in to fill in for certain editors. Directors. She actually filmed some of the 1930 adaptation of Uncle Tom's Cabin. And she was the first person to experiment and use certain things. She was the first director to use split screen in a movie. She also was the first woman to direct a feature, and it came 2 years before this. It was an adaptation of The Merchant of Venice. She also was one of the first people in general to experiment with synchronized sound in a movie. She was the first woman to own and operate a studio, and she was the first person to direct an adaptation of Tarzan. And so after that little bit of history on her, I'm going to turn this over to Mad and let her explain her thoughts on the movie and maybe also some of the interesting history that was happening at the time. Mad, take it away.
Yeah, so, wow, where to begin? First of all, I feel like that was a terrible, truly awful synopsis.
Yes.
I mean, I guess I'll just do like a quick kind of like rundown, I guess, of what I would consider the synopsis of the film, which is essentially there's this kind of like main character, I believe his name is Walton, the district attorney. Yeah, Walton.
Richard Walton.
Richard Walton. I'm terrible at names, so I'm just gonna, sorry about in advance to everyone that's listening to me try to give a synopsis without really remembering everyone's name. So he's this district attorney. He and his wife, like he really wants kids, but for whatever reason, like his wife isn't having any kids. Turns out, of course, that she is getting pregnant. She is just getting abortions whenever she does get pregnant, which they frame in the film as like she just likes having like a fun party lifestyle. But yeah, so she's getting abortions without him knowing, which is something too that like a bunch of her friends are also participating in. And then one day, the maids or like the housekeeper's daughter comes to stay, and at the same time, like her brother comes to stay, and of course he hooks up with the maid's daughter, who I thought also was really creepy because it was giving me some like she seems so underage. Like she's in this like cute little frilly dress with like this bow in her hair. Um, so that I was like, no. But yeah, so he has sex with her. She ends up pregnant as well. Goes to get an abortion. It ends up botched, and she dies. Um, and then because he's a district attorney, there's a whole case that looks into it and everything that's happening, and the doctor gets put on trial. And I think it's like a kind of like fuck you. He lets him know. He lets Walton know that like his wife, he should check like the ledgers, and he goes in there and he finds his wife's name and a bunch of her friends. And of course it creates like a whole rift then, because where are his children? And they're in the back in the pearly gates of heaven, which feature prominently throughout this film.
Yeah.
So there's like the synopsis. I think the film itself is interesting in that it kind of takes place in like an interesting period in time. So, and I know we talked about this a little bit like offline, but the film came out in 1916, and abortion wasn't banned in the United States until 1910. Prior to that, pretty much throughout the entire history of the United States, and frankly, I mean, throughout most of human history, abortion was pretty much a non-issue. In the United States, they usually used what was referred to as like the quickening doctrine, which they adopted from Britain. So for a really long time, essentially what the quickening doctrine laid out was whenever, like, you could have an abortion whenever, up until the woman could like feel the baby move. So like if you felt your baby move, like it was probably an unsafe time at that point to have an abortion. And it wasn't any kind of like moral thing. Pretty much it was just essentially like it was an unsafe practice once you reached that stage in the pregnancy. And so that was pretty much the only kind of like law in the United States. The only exception, of course, being was there were anti-abortion laws for slaves. So that was like the only kind of like law or legal anything beyond the quickening doctrine that was in the United States up until that point in time. And part of the reason this ended up even becoming an issue is essentially because of modern medicine, because of doctors. Because the other thing that I think a lot of people don't think about is the idea of like getting pregnant and going in to see a gynecologist, and going and having your baby inside of a hospital is like it's very modern. Obviously, for most of human history, that is not how people had babies. You usually worked with like a midwife who would come and check on you throughout your pregnancy. Most of the time, people just had babies at home. And at this point in time, doctors were kind of trying to push back on a lot of that. So actually, like some of the first kind of like quote unquote pro-life movements in the United States were sort of like engineered largely by the doctors of like the American Medical Association. And in fact, they partnered really heavily with the Catholic Church and kind of like promoted this idea of like when life begins. And with modern medicine, like doctors knew the exact moment when life began, and it actually like predated this sort of like quickening period of time. And so they really pushed hard to create this sort of like legislation that eventually led to the banning of abortion in 1910. So it's interesting that this film takes place so quickly after this ban has gone through, And especially when you think about, like, throughout that film, again, like, there was a lot of very heavy biblical images. Like, the whole opening, I want to say, like, 5 minutes of the film is, like, this whole discussion of, like, sometimes angels, little, souls leave and go down to earth as, like, babies, but then sometimes they're booted back immediately because they're, like, unwanted. And it's, like, a great tragedy. So, there's, like, a lot of kind of tie-ins with, like, religion throughout all of it. Anytime you find out a woman's pregnant, like, the way that the movie signifies it is, like, it's like a little cherub baby face that pops up over her.
Yeah, a little superimposition.
Yeah, I actually also kind of thought it was interesting because, like, the doctor, Dr. Malfit, I thought he almost looked a little bit, like, devilish. He had kind of, like, the, like, pointy goatee.
The thin mustache.
Like, they made him look a little, like, it was, like, very sort of, like, gentleman devil vibes. So there's a lot of tie-in very clearly with this sort of, like, religious movement of being, like, very pro-life, very anti-abortion. So you've got that going on. The other thing that's, like, obviously awful and weird throughout the whole thing is, like, the mention of eugenics. Like, I think there's literally a line, I made a note somewhere, where they talk about Walton's sister having a contracted eugenic marriage, which was a thing. So obviously eugenics is terrible. It's ableist, it's racist, it's like a million terrible things. But I guess for those of you who aren't familiar, eugenics all has to do with, like, this kind of fake pseudoscientists. It ties into things too of, like, phrenology of, like, skull shapes, and, like, you can look at certain things and certain features and it'll, like, determine the kind of person that person's going to be. So the other thing that's interesting, I think, about this whole film is that, like, there's also this weird tie-in with religion, but also this kind of tie-in with, like, eugenics, and, like, these very clearly, like, well-off families were having these, like, eugenics marriages, which actually was, like, a somewhat common practice where women would go and they'd, like, see a doctor and, like, have themselves checked and get sort of, like, a eugenics health check, and then, like, have potential husbands get, like, eugenics health checks so that you could have, like really, like, I don't know, sort of, like, ideal or, like, model children.
Like Gattaca.
Yeah.
But, very pared down and simplified.
Gattaca. But it's also kind of interesting, too, because there's, like, a lot of tie-in as well, I want to say, throughout the film with, like, these sorts of ideas, especially tied in with, like, poverty, because there's that kind of brief interlude where, Walton's, one of the cases he ends up trying prior to all of this happening is Dr. Homer, who was, like, handing out literature pamphlets on birth control. And it's kind of like you have this sort of, like, little mini sort of, like, vignette where it shows all of these, like, super impoverished families, these women who are being beaten by their alcoholic husbands, having to, like, still have babies and things like that, and just, like, living in these horrible, like, this awful, awful abject poverty, this terrible existence. And the film almost feels kind of, like, pro birth control, but it's only pro-birth control for poor women. Those are the people that society doesn't need more of. What society needs more of are these very wealthy, well-off families. And so, like, these poor women using birth control and not having any more children is sort of positioned as this, like, very positive thing because it's better for society overall, because then you have less poor people, less bad people, less alcoholics, like, less of these disgusting, filthy, poor, impoverished people. Some very classist shit. Whereas, like, her, Walton's wife choosing to, and I feel really bad that I can't think of her name and I just called her Walton's wife.
She doesn't have one.
Okay. No, they just
She's
call
just
her
Mrs. Walton.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yes.
I was like, should I know this woman's name?
No, this
No.
this movie has all of the ists. It's also sexist.
Yeah. So, but like her choice to not have children, like they literally refer to it as like a selfish choice. Like it's viewed very negatively. Um, her decision to not have kids is basically framed as like she's this terrible, selfish, indulgent person who just enjoys having like this fun life with her friends
And petting her
and,
dogs.
and yeah, and
Yes.
petting dogs. Um, and so it's like her choice to not have kids is negative because she's a well-off, well-bred woman who should be having kids and creating more well-bred white kids to go forth and populate the country. But it's like all of the impoverished people, like they should be the ones using birth control. Which again, of course, too, like I think that whole interlude is like painted as though you're supposed to be like very sympathetic to Dr. Homer and everything like that. Of course, he still ends up like um, Walton ends up still like putting him to jail. Like
Yeah, the jury of all men still
yeah,
votes
the
for
jury
him
of all men
to.
still votes for him to go to jail. But like that whole interlude, it's painted to be, I think, like very much empathetic for these people, and like I feel like it was designed to like persuade you that this was like the right choice, and be like, oh, boo, they put Dr. Homer in jail. So you have that, and then you have that kind of again like juxtaposed with the other story, um, where again like he's very angry at his own wife for choosing to not have children. And then of course within that whole story as well, you have like this story of like this young girl who's this maid and she has sex without being married, and of course she immediately gets pregnant. And I think there's also like some coding around that too, because like prior to her having sex, again, she is depicted as like incredibly innocent. It's all like very light colored clothes, big bow in her hair. Like she looks super young and youthful. And like the day she like finds out she's pregnant, she's in like this dour, like black gown. It's very somber. And she looks like a million times older all of a sudden. And so it's like she made this choice, she lost her innocence, and now it's like real world, boom. And then of course she goes to get the abortion, and um, it's botched, and she ends up dying. And like her parting thing is to like tell her mother like what happened. Her mother's just like distraught about everything. So yes, so that's it's very like morality kind of story, which isn't anything like new. Like morality tales have been around since like forever. Like even at the beginning of like late 1790s, I think early 1800s. There's like Charlotte Temple, which again was also written by a woman. It was like a hugely popular book. And then it was like this morality of like this girl who goes off and follows this guy she falls in love with, and he like leaves her and abandons her. She dies destitute in poverty, blah, blah, blah. So like it's the same kind of shtick, but like movie edition. Again, also written and directed by a woman. So like it's interesting and intriguing. Obviously, I don't agree with the premise. I think it's awful. I think it's awful. As far as like the film itself, I think it's like an interesting look at a lot of the like ideas happening at the time period. Again, I think there's like a lot of interesting things happening there as far as class is concerned, because abortion is banned at this point in time, but because she's like a well-off woman, she and her little friends still have access to that, which I think like even now is like a very important thing, because I still today like who has access to things like that is very much determined by, I think, like class, race, like where you live, what you have, kind of like the resources you have access to. I feel like someone else should talk. I'm really talking a lot. I have so many things to say about this movie.
Lauren, why don't you take it away?
Okay, so I love going into movies not having a damn clue what it's going to be about, and just like letting it play out. So for a while, since it like starts out with the whole like birth control thing, And I was like, oh, this movie is going to be like a weird movie about like people who like, you know, should you get pregnant? Can you get pregnant?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And so for a while I was thinking that like the
Hey.
cherub thing was like these women's like longing for
Oh,
pregnancy.
okay.
And I was like going down that for a really long time, and then I realized that it was about abortions, and I did like a double take. I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. And I had to like rethink the entire movie for a little bit there. Because like it is the early 1900s of film, and so they really like obviously don't have a lot of, I guess technological advances at their behalf. And so like I thought, I was like, oh, this is the children that she could have if only, I thought it was like oh, like a miscarriage story instead of it being about abortions. And it kind of like threw me because I was like, I didn't know about all of this
Yeah.
history of the times and about, abortions being something that was even talked about back then in like, high society and whatnot, because like it seems like something that like, my grandmother would have like never spoke about. Like it was very hushed tones, like we don't talk about these things
Yeah.
kind of subject. And so the fact that like people are very like openly, like even this movie is weirdly like
Yeah.
protesting against it, but it's very loud once you figure it out.
Yeah. Although I do think it's interesting to your point, like I don't think they ever actually use the word abortion.
No, not at all. They do a lot of like weird like coding,
Yeah.
and she's like,
Euphemism.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. She's like sick is what they call it. Her friend is ill, and so she goes to the doctor, and the doctor makes her better. And then it's like really never talked about like what the illness is,
Yeah.
what he's doing. None of that is spoken of. And so it wasn't until like much later in the movie, because again, I had no idea what the plot, the synopsis was, that I was like, uh, are they talking? They are. Oh, it like it really hit me like a truck, like halfway through the movie. And I felt like this movie was really kind of like all over the board. Like to your point, I think that it was very like specific of who should be getting what. And I
Yeah.
think that that's where like the plot for me got a little muddy, because it was like, some people, sure, they can have birth control, but not other people. Like it's really wrong for you specifically. And it was really like this, wishy-washy kind of outlook on the whole idea. Like either you're for it or you're not. And that's kind of like, where I where I sit. And I felt like this movie was really hitting this weird like, it's fine for them, but not for you.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a little bit where the like larger eugenics conversation comes into play though. Yeah.
No, yeah, for sure. And honestly, like the whole beginning part with like the woman getting like beaten by her husband, and like not just like they were having a whole fisticuffs
It was a
moment.
brawl.
Like she was just as equally in that fight as he was. Like she was not backing down. It was I Ooh, man. Honestly, like the fight in this one was more interesting than the fight in the next movie that we
We'll
had
get
where
to that.
where he like punches him once in the chest and he goes down. Like I was like, these people are actually fighting right now, and they were like recording it. I was like, shit, this just got way more intense out of nowhere. I thought that like some of the imagery was really interesting in this movie, with like a lot of the obvious puppet or like the cutouts of like angels, and like the pearly gates that they would like do in like soft focus, so you couldn't tell like where the sticks
With like
were.
pounds of like fog and smoke.
Yeah. I was like, oh, I get it. You got to make an effect happen, and like I was like,
Yeah.
it looks good considering. Um, but I thought that the most interesting visual of this entire movie happens like at the end, where he's like super pissed at his wife, and we're like fast forwarding through time,
Time
where
and
it's like,
no.
Yes.
It's the ghost of all of the children that he never
That they
had with
could have
her.
had. Yeah.
Mhm.
Exactly. And it's like, first you get like them sitting there, and it's like the ghost, like toddler children come up and they're playing, and then like out of it goes away, and then his hair goes gray and he has a cane, and then like the adult children come out and he still looks really like upset and grumpy about the fact that like, where are his children? And I think that's just like a weird like concept of thinking that like, I guess these children that she's aborted have had like spirits and lives and like have come down from heaven, and could have had so much when in reality, it's just a bunch of cells. But that's a whole different topic. No, I think that was probably like the most interesting moment for me, especially was just like the like transitional effect of it. It felt very like theater almost, of like this,
Yeah.
and then they panned away, and then the adults came out, and it was like this really smooth, honestly, for 1916 like transition moment, and then the movie stops, and that's
Yeah.
like the last. That's it. I will say that like I I wanted them to figure out where they were gonna put like words more frequently. I felt like a
These long stretches where it would just be like a lot of people doing stuff with no sound, and then like finally a card would come up, and I'd be like, oh, I would just kind of like make up. I'd like just kind of be like, I guess they're talking about this right now, and then finally 5 minutes later, it'd be like a card.
no, literally, and I felt like that was also like tying into a lot of my confusion of what the plot was, because it was just like a lot watching people pantomime for a really long time, and then like the card that for like most of the movie, like the cards that popped up would be like scene based things. It would be like, now our scene is transitioning, and so it'd be like, her brother came to visit,
Yeah.
and such's daughter is here, and I was like, great, but like they had a whole scene that we got nothing about, like the women chatting with their martinis or in their teas and things, and like that scene was just like, no, it's just a bunch of hoity-toity women doing women things. Skip ahead.
Yeah, no, I did think so. Kind of like off of what you're sort of been talking about and touching on is like, I guess as far as some of her like director choices and like some of the editing like I do think that like some of what she did is different and interesting, because yeah, like I was also expecting the kind of like classic format of you got like people kind of doing like one or two things here, and then there's like a little dialogue card, and like that didn't really happen. It was a lot more just she let it play out more on screen than I think a lot of other, like black and white, films I've seen before that, are silent movies. I thought she did. She kind of like let whole little like vignettes occur, and then sort of did like a little summarization with like a here's what's about to like an intro to like the next little scene, which I thought was like interesting at times. I agree it made things sort of like a little difficult to sort of parse through what all was happening. Um, but no, and I also think she kind of like it was like one of the first movies too that I can think of that's like an old silent film where like you almost had like flashbacks too, which again
Mm-hmm.
they didn't like really intro, but like when Dr. Homer is kind of like giving his testimony in court, they do like this flashback to his experiences, working among the like poor classes and things like that. And I think that's like one of the first movies I can think of where they had like extensive flashback scenes. So, like a lot of the stuff that she did choose to do, like some of the graphics and things like that, I did think was like I was like surprised. I thought it was interesting, and it did make the film feel different visually than like a lot of other silent movies I've seen.
No, yeah, and like there was the moment, like I think that like there was like a halfway point where like the movie finally, like she couldn't continue to do that without putting more in, and so like out of nowhere we just like got more talking, and like it got more serious.
Yeah.
Especially with like the courtroom scene, like we got a way more interaction and less like I guess staging and like visuals. It was like more like this is what this movie is about, and that was the moment where I was like, "Oh, we've been talking about this the whole time." I see.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree.
No, yeah. Y'all have covered a lot of ground. And so I'll say this, she was very technically gifted. She did nothing but social issue pictures, stuff about the temperance movement, stuff about women, stuff about abortion. Like, this is her entire bag, her whole career, until eventually, like, the audience decided, like, we're tired of you, and her movies started to tank. She is very technically gifted, though, and at the time, you know, she was kind of right up there as far as advanced techniques that she was doing with D.W. Griffith, another problematic film director of the time period. But, like, she's one of the few directors of the silent era, especially the time that she was working, that used close-ups. You know, because pretty much everything lived in a wide shot in silent films for a long time. And she doesn't get, like, close, but she's one of the few people who actually goes and does, like, reaction shots.
Like different camera angles.
Yeah. So she was very technically talented. And her idea is very, whether she meant it to be or not, it reads very much vaguely racist, you know, very, very homogenous, you know, very classist. There's a lot to unpack with this message that we could spend a lot of time talking about in terms of, especially when you look at the history of eugenics and her inclusion of that into the conversation. It gets very complicated. The other thing that I was just going to make an interesting note of is the name Homer. It's really interesting that Homer, you know, most people go and think Homer Simpson, The Simpsons. But there are two instances now that I can think, huh?
I think that predates this movie predates The Simpsons. I think.
Yeah. But what I was going to say was that there are now two instances that I can think of where Homer is kind of applied to this kind of semi-sympathetic, everymanish character kind of wedged into socio-political commentary. And so there's now Dr. Homer in this, but then a few years later, you've got Clifford Odets, who was doing all of his social and economic plays and stuff like that, and he had a character called Homer Simpson, who was this sort of everyman wedged into a complicated socio-political context. And so I think it's interesting that, like, for a little while, it feels like in the early 20th century, Homer was this name. It makes me think of, like, Wickus in District 9. It's like a fucking dingus character.
Yeah.
Well, see, I thought you were gonna go with like Homer, like the oh gosh, the like old the ancient like Homer, the Odyssey. Yeah, I thought you were gonna like go in that direction. I was not expecting a completely separate from the Simpsons Simpson. You know, Now I feel like they ripped that right out of there, and we're like, I'll take that. You know.
But honestly, no, I don't. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say the thing I do think is interesting, though, whether or not you agree with like the topic of her film, which obviously I do not. I do think it's interesting though that like this, vibes very kind of like again like very morality story, very like women's place is to be a certain kind of women's place is to be a wife and a mother. But I think it's so interesting to have this like woman writing this, being a prolific director, working in this industry, being a working woman, while also creating these stories that push this like very intense narrative of like traditional womanhood and this strange kind of like version and like dissonance between those two things.
No,
No,
yeah,
yeah.
I was thinking the same thing because honestly, like at the end of the day, the wife isn't our main character. The district attorney is. He is our main character. She is a subplot, and that's why at the end, like the where are my children is a
Yeah,
statement.
his,
Yeah,
his,
it's his statement.
yeah.
This is his truth. These he is going on his journey, and I think that it's really interesting to like be a woman writing this, directing this, but still somehow having it be like from a man's perspective.
Hmm. I definitely agree.
No, that's really valid. So we'll do it, I guess, in order. So Mad, then Lauren, then me. If you had to rate Where Are My Children out of five, what would you give it?
Oh, I don't know. For like technical work, I'll give it a five. In like just straight up like cinematography, technical work, I'll give it a five. I thought it was visually interesting. I hated the plot and some of the pacing I thought was really off. So I'll give it like a I don't know, like a two. Because but again also I think this is heavily painted by the fact that again, very clearly I do not agree with any of the content.
No, oh my gosh, thank you. I was gonna say it too as well. I just at the after watching this movie, I was just like, what the hell? Like I was really like angry the fact that like this movie got to be made with this just like crazy inflammatory like topic, you know. And just the spread of misinformation on like a very wide scale that I'm sure that this movie like touched a lot of people of the times and like therefore cascaded into the world that we live in today. And so I've really gotta blame this movie for a lot of stuff. But I do agree with Matt. I think that like technically speaking, this movie is like a one of a kind of the times. Like it is really a before a lot of movies that like we've watched that are from the 20s and 30s that are not as technically advanced as this, that are very like, the camera is just basically like your seat in the audience of this theater and you only get one view and it is wide and you get to see everything. And I think that, from that aspect of it, I will agree that it is like very technically an interesting film. I just hate everything that it has to say.
No, I think that that's fair. I'm gonna go just for a lump score of 2.5. Because again, like Matt said, she is a very technically gifted filmmaker, especially for the time. She's doing some interesting things on a visual narrative level. Um, and she was also doing stuff, again, for a little bit of historical context, she was doing this kind of stuff 6 years before women got the right to vote.
Yeah.
And, so she was doing all of this stuff, eventually owning her own studio. She got divorced. She's a very interesting woman.
Like I said, she's like
Um,
oddly progressive in some ways,
mhm.
But not.
but
But
not
the but the overall politics of this movie becomes so muddy, and the themes get so contradictory on themselves, and also steeped in so much problematic thinking that it ultimately ends up really detracting from. And I think that that's also why her legacy has not really moved much further. Um, because a lot of female directors, a lot of women directors of the time period that we do remember more fondly now kind of got picked up again in the 70s in like that wave of feminism. And like there's no way in hell that
No.
any of those women were going to go back and be like, let's raise up Lois Weber. And
Somebody
so
was, but that woman is the mother of Carrie from.
and
So
so I think I'm going to go for just a clean 2.5 on this one.
all right.
right in the middle.
Yeah. So moving on, we now have Dorothy Arzner's Dance Girl Dance from 1940. For a little bit of background on Dear Dorothy, she was born in 1897, almost 20 years after Lois, in San Francisco, California. She came from a very wealthy family. Um, and essentially her father guaranteed that like she would never have to work if she didn't want to. And so she never
Be nice.
Right?
so she never worked really for income. Um, she made 21 films, I believe, from 1927 to 1943. She was the first woman inducted into the Directors Guild of America.
Oh.
She began her career as a typist, then as a script supervisor, and then she became an editor. And she worked in some of the same places and was working at the same time also as Lois Weber. She was the developer of an early boom mic because one of her first actors was Carolyn Bow from Wings, who was a silent actor who moved into the talkies.
Mm.
And apparently Bow felt very uncomfortable and wasn't sure what to do, and so she put a microphone on the end of a fishing pole of some kind, and so that way she could move around, and someone could just follow her with a microphone.
Hey, that's great.
Yeah.
It's honestly not that much different.
No. She was also one of the first people to create a film course for a college setting. And then when she was done directing films, because of her relationship to Joan Crawford, if I'm not mistaken, who ended up being on the board of directors for Pepsi, she ended up directing over 50 commercials for Pepsi after she retired.
Wow. Go figure.
Random.
She was a lesbian, and she had a relationship with the choreographer for Dance Girl Dance, and she also supposedly had a relationship with Joan Crawford.
That explains more,
Uh-huh.
actually.
And if you look at her, she definitely presented, if you find some pictures of her, she definitely presented herself in a very masculine way. A lot of suits, a lot of ties. She kept her hair short, nicely combed. And so she definitely presented herself very much in a more masculine, especially for the times, presentation.
Well, I mean, that makes sense. There's a lot of accounts of like lesbians of the era going into the more like masculine clothing.
Mm-hmm.
It's you know it's taboo.
Yeah.
And so it was really like kind of stamping themselves as like an other of of the times is really like embracing something that is not expected of who you are.
She also gave the big start to a lot of women. And one of those big ones is definitely Katharine Hepburn.
Oh, okay. I think that you like put Katharine Hepburn and Maureen O'Hara together earlier and made Katharine O'Hara.
Oh, sorry. Sorry about that.
Imagine what a power child that would have been.
No,
exactly.
You're right. So our film from 1940, Dance Girl Dance, is directed by Dorothy Arzner. It is written by Tess Selsinger, Frank Davis, and Vicky Baum. It stars Maureen O'Hara, Lewis Hayward, Lucille Ball, Virginia Field, and Ralph Bellamy. And the premise is when a troupe of danseuses, that is what it says in the official plot description. Lauren's looking at it.
It does. I've never seen this word before in my life.
Become unemployed. One of them takes up burlesque dancing, while the other dreams of performing ballet. And so that's the plot synopsis for this one. Mad, do you want to take this one away as well, or?
Sure. I mean.
Yeah, go ahead. Kick it off.
I would say I could tell straight that a much more progressive film. Although it was just
What?
like more fun to watch. And I know I said this to you the other
Yes.
night, but I still think it's like really absurd to me that they tried to make Maureen O'Hara like not hot. Like they tried to make her like the like clunky best friend. And like, in what fucking world though? Like, what are you talking about? No. But no, I thought it was again, like I said, a lot more of a kind of like progressive film. I hated Jimmy. I hated Jimmy so much.
Mm.
Um, but no, I think I'm trying to gather all of my thoughts. I have like way less notes on it. One of my really, really great ones though is the final look that she has at the end of the movie is very Pilgrim chic, which I thought with the giant black hat and like the black outfit with like the little white collar. She looked like
Yes,
a
they played that hat so well for like
hat
staging. It was
insane.
great.
But no, I think obviously, like I said, it's a lot more of a progressive film. This is, we're going from like upper middle, like upper class, like stay at home ladies of leisure to like these are working class women. It's like a dance troupe of women who, sometimes literally like are on their last like coin and can't even take a taxi home, like working women who are, no male chaperone out in the world, taking care of themselves, looking out for one another. Like it's clearly like a very different class of women, very different outlook on women. Um, and all of the female characters really throughout are like very unique in their own individual kind of person. I mean, again, you have Maureen O'Hara, who like was her character Judy? Judy?
I think that's right.
Yes.
That sounds right. That feels
I mean,
right.
yeah, she's painted as a little bit more, kind of like, especially at the beginning, a little bit more like demure. Again, they kind of try to do like that thing they do in modern movies where it's like they put glasses on a girl and pull her hair up and like pretend like she's not like hot and super fucking fantastic, but like it's still like Maureen O'Hara, and I'm like, I know, what are you? We know. But no, so they kind of play her off a little bit as like a bit of like a milksop at the beginning. She's like a little bit like, but she really kind of comes into herself throughout the whole film, leading up to, this kind of like final moment where she like is just fed up with everyone's shit and she's like done being Lucille Ball's stooge, and she's done with like this whole crowd of mostly men jeering at her and treating her like shit, and she's done with like Jimmy and all of his crap. And so she just has her little like monologue, up on stage where she just kind of like condemns everybody for being out there and being super judgmental and being judgmental of her, of this like woman who comes out here and like, it's very kind of like you come out here to be like titillated and everything like that, and you like treat us like shit, and it's like all just to be this kind of like I'm a big man strutting around, and then like go home to your like mundane lives, and get your kicks by like shitting on people like me, um, which again felt like significantly more of a progressive stance, and like again Lucille Ball's character's sort of it's like va va voom. She's like the much more sort of like sensual one, the one that like all the men are into, and she's painted a little bit as like a little bit of like a gold digger. But I didn't think that the film did it in a way that made her like a completely unlikable character, or like that was the only thing about her. Like people, kind of played it off like she was smart, she was street smart, she was making the right choices. She just like had this thing that like, other people didn't have, and she knew she had that thing, and so she was gonna fucking use that thing to like get herself up and out. Like she comes back after she's gotten this job as this burlesque performer, and she's in this like nice dress and she looks super chic, and the like lady at the front desk or whatever is like, I always knew you were the smart one. Like she's not, the other women aren't like slut shaming her or like down on her for any of the choices she makes at any point in the film. And even like Marina Hara, like her character at the end, like they reconcile. She's like not mad at her. She's not upset with like what she did. The only thing I think that's like very questionable about like Lucille Ball's character is when she takes a man who's very clearly intoxicated and marries him. Not cool. Not cool. But even then, you know, she's just like, all right, like you're still in love with your ex-wife, clearly, like it's a done deal for $50,000. But she's like played off as like a very shrewd businesswoman, frankly. Um, and then, you know, you even have like the character of, and I can't think of what the secretary's name is, but the dance troupe guys, again, I'm so great with names. His like secretary, and like he
Miss
treats,
Olmsted.
thank you. He treats her very much as like an equal.
Mhm.
You know, it's not some sort of thing where she's like his hot secretary and like take my notes in my coffee order and get the fuck out, tits. Like it's not anything like that. He asks her opinion. He like includes her in conversations. He trusts her judgment. Like at the very end, he brings her to the burlesque show as like his friend, you know, and it felt like very like convivial, like two people who had like a relationship, like a working relationship, but also like legitimately liked each other, and there wasn't ever any kind of like weird sexual tension or anything like that. It was like we're just two people hanging out, which I think is kind of refreshing and not necessarily a thing you always saw at the time in film. Um, and yeah, you know, like when Maureen O'Hara gives her little speech at the end, she like stands up and is like fucking standing ovation. And even like the two guys were giving Lucille Ball's character shit about like being in a burlesque show, and they made some comment about it, and she was like, hey, she's just making a living like the rest of us. Like, you have no right to give her any shit for any of the choices she has to make. So I thought like a lot of the stances that they took were like relatively progressive for the time. There were some things that I thought again were just like patently ridiculous. Like I literally I laughed out loud when the old lady, the old dance troupe lady, when she got hit by a car and just dies. I was like,
Ah, same.
what just happened here? So I thought there were like, I felt like it could have been like a tighter film. I think there were like, it got a little lost in like random one-off side plot things, like her dying. Why did she need to die? I guess because then it created like the weird thing where like Marina Hera and the main dude like don't meet up or something.
Yeah, until they need to or whatever.
But like you could have, I don't know, you could have done other things. I literally was not expecting her to die when she died. Fucking plot twist. Oh my god. So there was like stuff like that. I really did find Jimmy like unbearable. Like he was just so erratic, and I was like, why do any of these women, like I understand why Lucille Ball was like putting up with that shit, because she was like, get money, like fair enough. But I was just like, Maureen O'Hara, why are you going on dates with this clearly like all over the place man? Like, honey, no, stay home. Don't hang out with him. He's no. Like, I thought just like he was like ridiculous, and then again, I thought that some of the like costume choices were funny. Like they do that whole sort of like modern choreography number, and I know PJ we talked about this, but I swear to God, I thought all the men looked like Vision.
They looked like Vision in the Halloween outfit.
That's right. I love that you called it the choreography number, because it does remind me of White Christmas, where they're like just doing choreography.
Yeah. Very like, we are trying to be modern and cutting edge, and this is choreography. Like that's
that's right.
The main dancer just like curls up into a ball on the floor for a while.
That's right, and then she like metamorphoses into like a modern woman of the times.
Yeah, I was just like, all right, guys. So like some of that was like a little bit ridiculous. But no, like, and I still think that one guy who showed up during the hula scene is like the spirit, like on par with like John Lovitz in A League of Their Own. Like I pulled up, I sent you those two pictures. They look so fucking similar. They're given the same energy. So yeah, no, there were parts of it I thought were just like patently ridiculous, and then the fight scene between the two of them was absurd. Also, I literally like paused and tried to take a screenshot of when Jimmy goes to like punch Puss in Boots or whatever, because he like goes like this, and then the guy just goes down. And I was like, it didn't even look like he hit him in the face. And I paused it and I took a screenshot. It's like he punched the guy in like the tit, and then the guy just
No, literally, he like punches him like dead in like the chest, like just boop, and then he just like goes down.
Ass over tea kettle. And I was like, what in the world is happening here? What?
It's like the weakest punch too. It's great.
It was super weak. It was like neep, and then the guy was just gone. And I was like, this is terrible fight choreography. It was much better when the Lucille Ball and Maureen O'Hara were fighting. I was like, that's
they were straight up scrapping it out. It was
way better fight scene than that whole situation. Terrible, terrible punch. And that's my hot take on that film.
No, I completely agree with like everything that you said. Oh gosh, you had some gems in there. No, I think that like, okay, so I do think that they painted Maureen O'Hara as this very like, oh, she's so sweet and innocent, and like, oh gosh, she's just had some hard times, but she's getting through it, and she's living in New York City, and it's hard to be a woman. You gotta be tough. And she's just like not that person. And so like you get to see her kind of get like bounced around a little bit from like job to job. And like I also like totally understood this entire movie, like really nothing about the New York performance scene has truly changed, honestly, from this film. It's kind of like you get a job and you're like, well, fuck it, like I guess I will do a touring show where I give kids traffic safety advice. I guess I am doing this for a little bit. It's not because I want to, but that is my real life story of living in New York. But like, no, I totally understood this whole like, you know, you got to do what you got to do kind of attitude. And then there's like two different sides to it. You know, there's the Maureen O'Hara Maureen O'Hara, who's like just trying to, you know, make an honest, like, this is my goal, I'm gonna get there. And then she sees the like true dance troupe, and she gets intimidated by it, and she's like, I can't do this. Why am I even here? What am I even doing with my entire journey? And like really like watching her try and like reevaluate like who she is as a person and like where she wants to go from here on. And then there's like the Lucille Ball character, who is very much like she is a shrewd businesswoman. Like that was perfect because like she knows exactly what her gifts are. She knows exactly how to play the room however she wants it to be. And she is also like used to being the center of attention. So like I understand her going for Jimmy, because like not only like even before she realizes that he has money, she's like, oh, it's just another dude that I can play, get as much as I want from him, and then drop him dead, you know, and then still be on top. You know, it's a power play. And it's really interesting. I have no idea why Maureen O'Hara wanted Jimmy. I also agree that I felt like he was very like a sporadic character, and like 90% of the times that we saw him, he was either like drunk or like sincere, and there was like no real in between him being blatantly blackout drunk and him being like, maybe I like this girl who I can't remember where I've known her from. And just you can do better. I promise you can. And like his plot, like I really could have just like done without it.
Yeah.
You know, I felt like they used it as kind of like this metamorphosis for like just another thing for Maureen to like get over on her journey of like self-discovery throughout this movie. But I really like, you could have just chucked that whole plot line for me and I would have been fine. Other than the like them fighting over him at the end bit, like we really just like didn't need him, and we could have found that same energy in just like a completely different point in the plot that like stuck with the whole like it being about two women just trying to make it in the industry.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, I knew that old bitch was gonna die. The moment she got on that bus and they kept talking about how pretty she looked in her brand new hat and this, that, and the other, I was like, she's gonna die. She's gonna die right now. Like, they're gonna plot twist me really hard because, like, they brought this character and they just so random too that they were just like, she just stands in the middle of traffic and goes, "What?" And then just like gets hit by by a car. Like, I know it wasn't supposed to be funny, and like her like dying words are like, "Don't forget the dance thing.
Yeah.
Go and dance." And I was like, what? It's not like it's not like tell my family I love them or anything important. She's like, remember his name is such and such. Go and do the thing. And I was just like, why? Why are we even wasting time with this? It was, but I got a good hearty chuckle out of that whole scene.
I also like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go.
I was gonna say, it always, like, the other thing that I was just, like, perplexed by, I was like, why? I was like, I did not understand why Maureen O'Hara hated, what was his name, Adam or Steve, or whatever the fucking, like, main dance guy. What was his name?
Oh, I don't know, the guy with the lipstick. I kept, was I the only one who noticed the fact that, like, his lips were, like, oddly, like, tinted the entire film?
No, like, I did not understand how, I think that was the thing. I was like, I don't understand why she's, like, drawn to hanging out with Jimmy. But this guy, who seemed, like, way more even-keeled, was like, hey, what's up? Like, just
Steve.
help her out, Steve. Get her, like, a taxi, because it was raining. Like, he was just being, like, a decent person. And then, like, kept leaving her his fucking business card, and she was like, fuck you in hell, Steve. Adios. Like, it's just like,
no, yeah, because also, like, that was before she even realized, like, the whole, like, plot twist at the end is, like, she has no idea that this is the guy that she was going to audition for. Exactly. Even though he keeps trying to, like, leave his card for her and all of this stuff, and, like, saw her in the same building, on the same floor. Yeah. Like, it's, I completely agree, honestly. Like, I don't understand, because I think that that's where she was like, I gotta be a tough New York girl.
Yeah, but she, like, picked going on. Yeah, you had bad instincts.
No, honestly, like, she really does just, like, lean into the wrong dude, where she's like, maybe this weird alcoholic guy who has, like, split personality, he just keeps going back and forth. Yeah, he's weird. Maybe I can change him. I don't know. And this guy who's, like, older, but also is, like, genuinely a nice dude, she's like, go fuck yourself.
Yeah. Nothing to do with this man.
No, yeah. It's so odd, but also, like, I found, like, his whole thing, like, hilarious as well. Like, his, like, I'm interested in this girl at first sight, and I have no idea why, and it just happens to be the girl that was in my office that I didn't get to meet. It's fate. I was like, why is he so drawn to this girl who all he did was see her in an elevator?
Yeah, 5 seconds in where she looked depressed as fuck, by the way.
No, yeah. But no, I really enjoyed this film a lot. I felt like the plot was really interesting, and you know, to your point, it was, like, very progressive, especially for the times of, like, you know, people have to make a living. This is the reality of what it is. Like, obviously it had a lot of, like, dramatized moments, but, like, for the most part it had a lot of heart to it. Yeah. And the characters weren't just like, this one's the bad guy and this one's the good one and these are the idiot ones. Like, they had, like, a lot of interesting, like, character development and nuance and at the end, like, it didn't just end the way that you're expecting a movie from the 40s to end, where, like, the guy gets the girl and it's a happy ending. Like, they even, like, at the end are like, you know, she's got everything but, like, the training, and we're gonna get her there, you know. It's an open door of, like, her getting her dream, but also, like, understanding, like, she's not there yet, you know, instead of it just being like happily ever after and we're done here.
Yeah, no, I agree. It wasn't just some sort of, like, pan to her, like, on stage as a star, fade to black, kind of, like, boom, rainbow ending. Like, Jimmy ends up back with his very mediocre ex-wife, like Lucille Ball's character doesn't get this sort of like happy ending where she has like a loaded husband, you know, like, and she seemed fine with it. She was like, all right, I'm gonna keep on hustling, I'm gonna keep on keeping on. Like she was
That's
fine.
right.
Let's go, baby. It's no big deal. And then yeah, like Eleanor, or not Eleanor. Eleanor was Jimmy's wife. Judy shows up. You know, at the end of so like it turns out it's the guy, and it's like this whole thing of like she gets to like start this whole process, and like her like one sort of like lamentation is that she could have been here like way earlier on, but she like fucked herself over.
No, yeah. I love the fact that she just like ends up like laughing herself to tears basically and realizing that like if only I had just like not brushed this guy off so many times.
Correct. Yeah.
Laughing herself to tears the moment you said it all, I thought was the end of Nightmare Alley. We need a geek. Just for a little while.
Yes!
Yes! That was incredible. It was incredible.
Oh, that's a good movie.
The only, honestly, that I again, y'all did a really great job at breaking this one down. I don't really have anything to add. The only things that I have to add are, you know, you can also tell that not only is this a more progressive or very different background director, but you can also see the effect of the fact that she's working in the thick of the Hays Code.
Yeah.
You know, she's having to put all of her themes much more subtly and a lot of her ideas much more subtly into the work. Because, you know, she can't show what a real burlesque show is like.
Oh my God, yes. I was watching it, I was like, this is a very tame burlesque show.
Uh-huh.
Oh, this is just average vaudeville. Like, that's all that was.
And so, like, you can really see the effect of, like, going a little bit before the Hays Code, going a little bit after the Hays Code, and then go and look at a movie in the middle of it, and it's an entirely different fucking ballpark, you know?
Yeah. I agree, definitely.
The only other note that I had to add was that Madame Lydia Basilova, played by Maria Ospenskaya,
Yes.
she was a character actor. She was known for the Wolfman. She was like the gypsy woman in the old Wolfman.
That makes a lot of sense.
And she was a, I think, USSR immigrant to America, and she actually studied under Stanislavski.
Hey, that again.
And she
honestly, I feel like they brought a lot of like that, like matronly, like of the acting prowess to this a lot.
And so she ended up becoming an acting teacher and an acting coach, and helped bring the Stanislavski acting method to America and to a generation of American actors. And those are honestly the only little bits that I have about this movie.
That's a good little bit. I didn't know that, and that hits right in my background.
And I will say, like, I know she gets TKO'd right at the beginning there, but like I thought she brought like a lot of like gravitas to like what I think really was not like a super, it's not like that there was a whole lot written into that character, but I thought that like her portrayal added a lot of layers to what was like a pretty anemic, I'm gonna say, bit of dialogue and like script probably for this
and
character.
Screen time. Yeah.
No, yeah, honestly, like her playing the matron, the troop leader, it was a very interesting, like, very small part that I think that like without her would have just kind of been like, just like another side character, almost like the guys who run the burlesque show, like who's it and what you call them, you know, it would have just been like whatever. But like I think that she did bring a lot of like
she brought like a grounding force to that troop. She was the glue holding that troop together, kind of thing.
No, yeah, and she also like she stood out in her own way, you know. She was her own person in it, and I thought that was really interesting as well. Also, like Lucille Ball, sorry, random aside, the fact that like Lucille's character the entire time was named Bubbles really just
Bubbles until she was Tiger Lily.
Well, yeah. Indeed. indeed, until she was Tiger Lily for no reason whatsoever.
I feel like Bubbles still works as a burlesque name. I guess it's not quite as fancy sounding. It's not like Lily St. Cyr or something, but
No, yeah, but I just really enjoyed the fact that like they were just like, oh, it's Bubbles, you know, like she really did sound like some like, you know, some stripper from like the Bronx or something. Like, oh,
actually,
it's Bubbles.
when they said her name was Bubbles, it made me think of Zach.
Zach and Mary make a porno.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so we'll go again in order of presentation. So Matt, if you had to rate Dance Girl Dance out of 5, what would you give it?
Okay, I'm gonna say a 3.5 because there were some plot elements that I think you could have just like cut and it would have been like a much tighter film. But I honestly, I really enjoyed it. It was fun, which the first one was not fun. And I watched them in order. So I watched Where Are My Children, and then followed it up immediately with that. And I was like, whew, thank God.
That's the right response.
I needed something else. And so like it's like super fun. It's like a fun, frivolous little movie. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a great deal.
No, I think that's fair. Lauren?
Honestly, I enjoyed this movie a lot. I liked the little performance little bits that we got with them like actually dancing and like Lucille performing her song, and we got to see like the number go a few times, and it really did feel like a working performer in like a real sense. Like I really enjoyed that. I also agree, yes, there were some plot points where I was like, oh no, throw it away, oh damn, gosh, you know, really miss it. But you know, for the most part, like I really enjoyed this movie. I think my biggest gripe with the movie is the fact that it's called Dance Girl Dance. Like what why? That's just the vaguest, just nonsense title. I really wanted the old lady to say it as she died, you know, dance, girl.
That's what I mean. That's what I thought her last words were gonna be, and then it wasn't. I was like, damn. Okay, fine.
We were so close. I think I'm gonna go with a 4. I really enjoyed this movie a lot. And I also like to see like Times Square in the 40s. That was fun without all of the like what we think of as Times Square, you know, there. But it was like it still felt right. And I was like, this is really cool, just getting to see New York, but in a completely different time period, but like in an authentic sense.
No, for sure. I'll go 4 as well. I really enjoyed it. There are definitely, again, some plotting and some pacing issues, which I think are totally fair. But no, it's a fun little romp. I liked it well enough that it's out in the Criterion collection, and I'd be tempted enough to get it and add it and have something, you know, help expand some of the variety and some of the access that we have in our physical media here at home. Even if it isn't something that I watch all the time, I think that it's something that I could be like, let's put on Dance Girl Dance, you know, and I think that's, yeah.
I also really enjoyed getting to see Lucille play something that isn't her iconic role as Lucy.
I agree. I thought it was just so refreshing.
Yeah, and she just does a phenomenal job, and she, you know, she's so smart as an actor, and it's just, this felt more like an honest portrayal of like who she is and what she could do than what, you know, her legacy has left behind.
No, for sure.
I definitely agree. Like everyone thinks about Lucille Ball and thinks about I Love Lucy. It is such an iconic character, but it is like really, I thought, nice and refreshing to see her in like a different role that was not I Love Lucy. And at the same token too, you're right, like I thought she was like a great, like her performance was great. She did like a phenomenal job of playing this kind of like street smart, I've got this, blah blah boom, and I know it kind of character. But then also at the same token, when she was doing the little like burlesque numbers and stuff, like I could still see totally her like prop comedy kind of like bona fides coming through with like all the stuff like the wind blowing, and like she just has such good timing, even just in like those little bits. I was like, God damn it, she's good.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's honestly all that we have for y'all today. I have all of Mad's Instagram and Twitter handles linked down below. I also have um, two of her pieces that she's written. Um, one is a sort of more of a piece of fiction, um, taking an accurate sexual history. Um, and then we also have the women on the screen and the woman in the mirror linked down below. Um, if you want to know more about Lucille Ball, you can go and check out the episode that we did on Being the Ricardos. We have some history on Lucille Ball in that one.
Yes.
And also be sure to check out last week's episode. And if you are interested, I mentioned Carolyn Bow briefly. And if you're interested in more about another Carolyn Bow movie, a month ago, we did Wings. And that's another good episode to check out as well. But that's just about all that we have for the show. Mad, do you have any final thoughts for the listeners?
Sorry everyone had to hear me do like some monologuing there for a while. No, but I thought both of these were like very interesting. Um, I thought, you know, from like a historical perspective, they were both fascinating, even again, if I didn't agree with like all of the content. And I thought it was like fun to kind of see like two women who did so many interesting, you know, things within their careers at two very different points in time, and just like how quickly too, like filmmaking itself evolved, and again, some of the like very different ideas about women presented in both of those films. And that's all I got.
Oh, yeah. Very well said. Dear, do you have
That's
anything?
my summary.
Um, I mean, I don't know, man.
If you don't have anything, that's fine.
um, what I'll leave the listeners with is this. Go watch something from someone or from somewhere that is foreign to you. You know, it'll be an interesting insight to a different perspective than your own, and you know, who doesn't like a well-rounded person?
No, that's
Yeah.
very fair. And if you want some suggestions on where to start, or some opinions on what we thought about some stuff, we also did a whole series of episodes in November where we did foreign or non-American films, including Japan, Egypt, India. So if you want, you can go and check those out for some suggestions. Um, I don't really have anything else to add or say to the listeners. Be sure to come and check out the show next week.
Yeah,
We're
Allison.
we're doing Women in Horror to close out March because I don't know, I love the horror genre. I think that it's a great platform for women and for women storytellers, and I think that it's always been a place for very progressive and interesting ideas to be put on screen. And so when we decided to do our Women in History Month, I knew that horror had to be a part of that. Or Women in Film Month, I knew that horror had to be a part of that. So make sure to come back next week because we have returning to the show Dr. Allison Pierce, who was on almost a year ago now, or like a year ago now, for the release of her book, Women in Horror. We did Pet Cemetery by Mary Lambert. So definitely be sure to come back next week. And stay safe out there. It's to quote Cat Stevens, "Ooh baby, it's a wild world." So stay safe out there. Have a good night, and we'll talk to y'all next week.
Bye.
Bye.